Imagine a front door being kicked in at a holiday gathering, the noise, the shocked faces, the explode of a peaceful evening into something none of them could have ever prepared for. It was supposed to be a night of comfort. Instead, it became the moment a quiet suburban family stepped onto the stage of a national panic, a moment that would shatter more than just a holiday. Please help this channel grow. Like the video, try the new hype feature, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. The Friedmans were, by many measures, an ordinary American family. A father who taught weekend computer classes to neighborhood boys, a mother who kept the house together, and 3 boys who grew up with home movies and family rituals. They lived in Great Neck, Long Island, picket fences, PTA meetings, bar mitzvahs, the picture of suburban respectability. In 1984, federal agents intercepted a package of illicit images sent to a suburban address. That interception became part of a broader investigation into child pornography, eventually led investigators to a man named Arnold Friedman, who ran computer classes for local boys in the basement of his home. Over the next 3 years, the quiet life of the Friedman family began to show cracks. Investigators began interviewing children who had attended the classes. Allegations followed. As accusations multiplied, the community's certainty began to erode. Neighbors whispered, parents panicked, and the family's private home movies took on the hue of a public exhibit. This story would come to be known by many names: the case of the Friedmans, the scandal that tore a town apart, and later, the subject of a controversial documentary. But at the center of the storm stood 2 men, Arnold Friedman, the father, and his youngest son, Jesse, both accused of acts the town had trouble imagining occurring in their own basements. The allegations were disturbing, and they were many. Men and boys in positions of trust. Children whose voices would later be replayed in courtrooms and on television. The original spark, a mailing of illegal images, expanded into claims of abuse, some said to have happened during the computer classes. Parents filed complaints. Investigators listened, recorded, and then acted. Because these were allegations involving children, the language and the evidence in public accounts were necessarily circumspect. What the records show are interviews, inconsistencies, and police and prosecutorial decisions that would later be described as both urgently necessary and deeply flawed. In the winter of the late 1980s, the investigation culminated in arrests. Arnold and Jesse Friedman were taken into custody. News crews arrived, the neighborhood gaped, and a family's private chaos became public spectacle. The charges were sweeping. The community, seared by fear and sensational headlines, demanded answers. How do you reconcile the man who hosts kids for computer lessons with the possibility that he could harm them? The investigation unfolded in layers: a federal tip about illicit material, a local police inquiry focused on the computer classes, interviews with children, and, crucially, the shadow of national anxiety. The 1980s were a decade in which cases of child abuse, sometimes amplified by the media and by hotline networks, often produced rapid and intense criminal probes. Investigators questioned dozens of witnesses and young boys who had attended Arnold's classes. Some recanted later, some offered inconsistent accounts, and some stuck to their statements. Defense attorneys argued that interview techniques, including the use of suggestive questions and repeated interviews, may have produced false memories or led to coerced testimony. Prosecutors and parents countered that the accumulation of reports and the material evidence demanded accountability. Amid the legal wrangling, both Arnold and Jesse ultimately entered guilty pleas. Those pleas, which are highly consequential, were explained later by both men as strategic, a choice between accepting a plea and facing the uncertainty of trial, in which they believed the climate and the weight of accusations would leave them worse off. But the investigation did not end with prison sentences. Years later, the case would be re-examined and reopened by a federal appeals panel which, in an unusual move, urged prosecutors to take a fresh look at whether the convictions might have been tainted by the hysteria and investigative overreach of the era. Legally, the immediate outcome was decisive. Arnold and Jesse Friedman both pled guilty. They were convicted and sentenced. The sentences, the pleas, and the community's trauma remained fixed in public memory. Arnold did not live long after the convictions. He died in prison in 1995, an overdose of antidepressants, ending a life that had once been ordinary and now had been rendered infamous. Jesse served 13 years and was released in 2001. In the years afterward, he sought to clear his name, to challenge the plea, and to question the methods used in the investigation. His efforts and the questions they raised would not only keep the story alive, but would prompt a formal reinvestigation decades later. In 2010, a federal appeals court issued a strongly worded opinion that while upholding the conviction on procedural grounds, said there was a reasonable likelihood that the defendant may have been wrongfully convicted, and urged prosecutors to re-examine the case. Prompted by that decision, Nassau County District Attorney Kathleen Rice commissioned a multi-year conviction integrity review. In June 2013, her office released a lengthy report concluding that the original investigation and prosecutions were justified and that there was insufficient basis to overturn the convictions. The report and the responses to its split opinion. Advocates and some legal scholars criticized the review as incomplete and imperfect. Others accepted its findings. For the Friedmans themselves, for Jesse, who served years inside, and for Arnold, whose life ended behind bars, the legal debate could not return what had been lost: freedom, reputation, the quiet rhythms of home. One of the most haunting features of this story is the presence of home movies, amateur footage shot by the Friedmans themselves. These images, meant for private reminiscing, became exhibits in a national conversation and a source of public fascination. In the tapes we see laughter, arguments, nerves, and the ordinary cruelty of family life. We see a father who is both doting and, in other accounts, accused. We see brothers who record one another. We see a mother, at times, uncertain of what she believes. What did the camera reveal that human memory could not? Did those endless rounds of looking at each other, of filming, of rehearsing smiles, make the family more truthful, or did they commodify their pain? The director Andrew Uretsky compiled that footage into a 2003 documentary, Capturing the Friedmans, which reintroduced the family to a new audience and rekindled debate. The film earned critical acclaim and fierce controversy for the way it presented the evidence and the family's interior life without offering neat conclusions. The Friedman case is often cited as emblematic of a particular era, a period when fears about child abuse produced sweeping investigations across the country. Some prosecutors and families felt validation that justice was sought. Others warned that the fervor of the time compromised the reliability of testimony and the fairness of process. The controversy fed scholarship about suggestibility, memory, and the ethics of interviewing children, debates that continue to influence how such cases are handled today. The 2013 reinvestigation by the Nassau DA upheld the convictions and cited corroborating evidence. But the legal system's answers left social questions unresolved: how communities respond to allegations, how media shapes public perception, and how a family survives the slow violence of suspicion. The Friedman story resists easy moral closure. It is a narrative of accusation and consequence. Yes, but it is also a human story of love and failure, of loyalty and doubt. Arnold Friedman's life ended in prison. Jesse Friedman's years were rearranged by a plea and by the heavy stamp of being a convicted sex offender. The family's home videos, once private, provoked a public conversation about truth and memory that refuses to settle. In a society that demands both truth and protection, how do we hold the space for both justice and mercy? For the Friedmans, the answer was never simple. For us, the question lingers. When the holiday lights go down and the noise of the public fades, what do we owe to the people whose lives were broken by crimes, by accusations, or by the machinery that seeks to make sense of both?